Awesome. Okay, fantastic. So super excited to be here. I am Tim Ellis. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Relativity Space. But yes, hopefully people have heard of us. If not, I'll definitely give an intro. And then this is Richelle, my wife, and yep.
Hi everyone. I am an artist. I am really inspired by our environment, and what brought me to Space Analogs was this experience of expeditionary art practice and really going and traveling to these places to reflect the different ecosystems and communities of each place. So this is an unconventional talk in the way that we're shaping it around Tim and my story together.
Yeah. Yes, first time, first together talk, and hopefully not the last one. So you'll quickly see why we were drawn to each other. So we're gonna start. Richelle and I have now been together 9 years, almost 9 years, and we met back at USC. So we were both in Southern California, went to college in Los Angeles. I actually originally went to USC and moved from Texas, thinking I was going to graduate and be a screenwriter and write movies and film. I was actually not into sci-fi. It was really Bret Easton Ellis and American Psycho and Fight Club that brought me to film and USC, and I love Donnie Darko and these kind of more social commentary movies. But then got into rockets in undergrad, so I built and flew about 24 rockets while in college. We were the first students in the world to launch a rocket to space. And then I met Richelle at TEDx, where I was giving a talk about Mars and the euphoria of human exploration.
And I was talking about networks and systems, understanding our role within a networked community. And so I guess we just really liked each other's talks, and we've been together ever since.
Yeah, so that's really how we met, but you know, I think one of the things that stuck out to me, and certainly being at this conference already for the last day and a half, it's very awesome, you know, work that everyone's doing. I think it's way more scientifically amazing and interesting than I was expecting. I mean, Richelle obviously has done analogs since, but I think we were just really drawn to this idea quickly after we met that art plus science equals wonder. So I found this poster in this kind of clothing company called Imaginary Foundation, and it had a Venn diagram that had art on one side and science on the other, and wonder was in the middle. And that was actually the first Christmas present I ever gave Richelle, like 2 months after we started dating. And that's actually carried through kind of our entire relationship. We actually just had our wedding about 4 weeks ago, and that was our backdrop, was a Venn diagram, where Richelle stood on the art side, I stood on the science side, and wonder was in the middle.
Right. Wonder is also engraved in our wedding rings. And I think it really is just this idea of when you have these worlds colliding, it enables inspiration. And Tim and I talk so much about how inspiration is what can provoke change and action. And so when we are working together, it's really trying to find the methods to unlock that sensation so other people feel motivated to make a difference based on awe.
Yeah, great. So we pretty much took our interest in art plus science equals wonder. I was then working at Blue Origin, so I'd interned there 3 times back to back to back. I was the youngest ever intern at Blue, and then the longest running intern. I ended up working there full time for 2 years, mostly because it was such a small company. So the whole team was about 150 people. I was in the propulsion department. It was only 20 people when I was first there. So it was very cool to get kind of an overall systems view of how to design and build a rocket nearly from scratch. You know, SpaceX, I think, was 1,000 or so people at the time, so most of my friends went there. You know, I think maybe I should have gone to SpaceX. I don't know, but it worked out. It worked out in the end. But yeah, it was very, very cool. And then, you know, actually, I think going back to the slide, you know, Richelle, of course, was doing art residencies after graduating USC. I'll let her talk more in depth about that, but she's done 17 different art residencies to date. That's not including analogs, so that's, you know, analogs are kind of the next phase of residencies. But we almost started a science art gallery together. So I haven't told the story too much, but we actually wrote, when I was at Blue Origin, you know, she'd come to visit me. We wrote a business plan that, we have like a full business plan written out. We actually were on the eve of signing a lease for a very small space in Pioneer Square for a science art gallery called Relativity Gallery. So that's actually where the name Relativity Space came from, is we were gonna do this. It was like literally how much money money could I lose and then use the tax write-off to, you know, with my Blue Origin salary, like basically be able to live on ramen. And I was like very serious about doing it. It was my dad that kind of, you know, told us to maybe think twice, and it made us pause. It did make us pause.
But we do have some exciting updates. Relativity Gallery will be constructed in the new Relativity headquarters, which is 1 million square feet. We'll get into that in a little bit. But it really is that process of working together to jointly build a vision that we can be excited about.
Yeah, that's right. So started Relativity Space then, and it was really like December 2015. So started in a WeWork in Seattle. Of course, Richelle is, you know, kind of #1 supporter, and I mean we've talked so much about business trajectory and engineering and what are we going to do and how do we refine this idea. So I actually feel like the whole process of refining the vision for what is now Relativity Space, like really Richelle's probably played the biggest role in my mind, because we talk about work all the time, but it's not work to us. I think it's very fun, and it's really, you know, our life's passion. But for those that don't know, so Relativity Space, we're 3D printing rockets. We built the world's largest metal 3D printers, and we have this long-term mission of making humanity multiplanetary, same as SpaceX. That's there for a reason, because I do think there need to be more companies working at scale to actually make this future happen in our lifetime. I'm very convinced that it's inevitable somebody has to build the company that's going to create all these manufacturing technologies on Mars. And it was clear at the time, you know, when I was at Blue Origin, after I started the metal 3D printing division, and, you know, very luckily got to work directly with Jeff on doing that, that it was, yeah, that was sort of like nights and weekends doing 3D printing. Really, propulsion engineering was the mainline thing I would work on. But after testing a bunch of rocket engines that I designed with this technology, you know, I didn't really realize like why the whole thing couldn't be done that way. And somebody had to found that company. And, you know, I watched SpaceX land rockets and dock with the International Space Station, which to me was basically the most inspiring thing ever. But after 13 years of success, not a single other company had been founded to make that mission happen. So I did not think that trajectory was very inspiring. Actually, SpaceX just celebrated their 2-decade anniversary a few weeks ago, maybe like yesterday. I don't know, it was like very recent, officially. And yeah, it's still just us and SpaceX, so I am hoping that there's more, you know, venture-backed companies that are really trying to make a business both lucrative on Earth, but also get towards Mars.
And then my practice is really exploring where humanity, technology, and the environment collide. So I found that the best way to explore these themes is through expeditionary research, traveling to far-reaching places around the planet, up near the North Pole, to rural areas in Japan, to making art inside of a habitat on Mars, and getting into that mindset as we travel, as we explore, how does that evolve our thinking, but also how does that change the materials we use and the way that we create?
Yeah, definitely. So I think during this early forming phase, this is a photo of one of the, I think it's really the 3rd version of our 3D printer. It's the first one we showed publicly. It's called Stargate, so I named it after StarCraft. We actually built a prototype called Gateway, because everyone knows in StarCraft you have to build the gateway before the Stargate, so that was very key. But yeah, in doing this, I just remember looking at Richelle doing all these residencies and being like, you're kind of crazy, but I love it. You know, it was very interesting to me, and I think, yeah, and I think, you know, what you've done, and certainly this community, I think it's so inspiring. So yeah, really one important goal for both of our work is how do we take this kind of community and passion and momentum and just figure out how to scale it to a much larger group of people. Because I still, you know, we'll sort of get to it later, but I still fundamentally believe if there were 1 million people living on the moon or living on Mars right now during this conference, this would probably be more than 120 amazingly dedicated people. It'd probably be, you know, many thousands, and we'd be watching CNN Mars News and kind of, you know, wondering who's going to win the moon election. Like, it would be a very interesting alternative future to create. Yeah, okay, so then, you know, kind of we're stitching places where me and Richelle directly overlap, so we're kind of watching each other's journeys. I was really inspired by seeing what she created, and this is a painting called Overview. So it was one that Richelle made during a residency in San Francisco, and it's really quite large. I think it's like, what, 18 feet wide or something? Yeah, pretty big. And it really depicts kind of this collision of art, technology, the environment, and then space all put together. We thought, you know, no better place for it to go than at Relativity. So this is a picture of Relativity. Actually, that chrome thing in the middle there, you can barely see, is a prototype rocket engine. So it's one of the first ones we actually tested. And I just remember walking around the office and seeing engineers be so inspired by this particular work. And you know, obviously, like, use that same inspiration to then go create something that's actually going to fly to orbit.
And along those lines, so this theme of overview, so much of our conversation so far at the conference is how do we channel the overview effect? How do we give this experience to more people that can't fly to space? And so, you know, working closely with this community, I've been able to find different ways to translate that message. And I think that that's becoming such an integral thing for moving not only the art world forward, but also this industry, this space exploration, and how can we start to infiltrate the overview effect into every part of our lives.
Yeah, so yeah, this was super great to see. And then, of course, that sort of inspiration helped us do things like this. So this is one of Relativity's early rocket engine tests. I think we've cleared almost 1,400 tests at this point. So 1,400 of, you know, rocket engine tests of various lengths. Most of them are, you know, several minutes long at this point. But yeah, I think, you know, sort of these photos and this material, I think, has also made its way into some of Richelle's work. And I think it's just that feedback loop of, again, art plus science equals wonder. Like, how do we both demonstrate real progress in the physical world, but then also use that same kind of progress to ideate new ideas of how to continue to inspire more people to go after their dreams and do really big things. Like, I've sort of always felt you have both your direct involvement in the thing that you actually do yourself, which is, you know, potentially quite large, but I think that pales in comparison to the leverage you have in inspiring many more people to do something equivalently. I think, you know, Dr. Simon Proctor certainly talked about that. Like, you yourself had an amazing experience, but there's probably going to be 1,000 times more people that are also able to do experiences just because they're inspired, which is really great.
Next slide. All right, you can press it one more time because this has a little bit of a video. Oh, or perhaps it's not.
Oh. No.
So this is a bit of a glimpse inside of Relativity headquarters back in Los Angeles, Long Beach area. Oh, we're losing the visual.
No.
But essentially, this is a sculpture that's inspired by Relativity Space. So I've been watching how the 3D printing technology is developing, how you can get these incredible organic structures, and how it really is so often inspired by nature. And as you know, we're starting to think about moving off world. How can we use biomimicry and nature to inform our technology? So this is actually called Spiral Dynamics, and it's the falling flight of a maple seed, which was actually used in early avionics with helicopter propellers. And so just seeing how can we reference the natural world around us to evolve our technology. And then using the chrome finish, like many of Relativity parts, it reflects both the sky and the ground in the structure, and you kind of ascend up this rotating sculpture, which is kinetic.
Yeah, and that's what you're missing in the video. It's really amazing when it moves because it almost looks like an optical illusion, and the kind of spire backbone in the middle there stays perfectly still, so everything's just rotating around it, really nice and slow. So you can check it out on Richelle's website if you want to see. But it was really cool, and I remember, you know, I kind of have fought some uphill battles at times with engineers. Like, I remember this woman, Ruby, she actually just celebrated her 5-year anniversary at Relativity today, so early employee. And she kind of pulled us aside at our last company holiday party and was like, you know what, Tim, I had to install this seed pod sculpture, and that was so much work, and we had to structurally reinforce the roof. Like, that was like a big endeavor, and she was just like, you know, it was such a big headache and project. I was always asking myself, why are we putting art in the lobby? Like, this is such a silly thing, or, you know, it's not engineering the rocket and like engines and avionics. But then she said, what's so funny is every single supplier and vendor I bring in now literally points out that seed pod sculpture that's spinning around in the lobby and says, wow, that is like the coolest thing ever, and it really makes your company stand out and look different, and be more forward thinking, because really this collision of art and science, yeah, it's kind of short-sighted in the business world, I think. Like, you certainly need to make a very big company. That's obviously what you're doing and employing a lot of people. But I also think kind of there's a way to do it with some pizzazz that, you know, certainly kind of has a much bigger effect than just the business itself.
So another thing Tim and I are always talking about is this concept of exploration versus imploration. So that's a word coined, and we have I'm working on a book that's coming out next year called Imploration, which is highlighting interviews with astronauts, artists, scientists. Several of you will be featured in this book publication. But this idea of imploration, so how can we have that sense of social responsibility as we explore by understanding our individual roles within these greater networks, within a globally connected world. So the ways that I'm interpreting this as an artist is taking found materials, debris, weaving the core of our planet, creating that overview effect sensation, but also thinking about how what we're doing here on Earth is contained on the biosphere, and how can we remix, rewrite that story of regeneration, but also push that overview effect sensation even further. So as I'm looking at our planet in this process of imploration, Tim is stretching out further towards exploration.
Yeah, so we included a photo of Mars here. No hate on the moon, by the way, but yeah, I think it's important to have a singular unified mission for the vision of humanity and what direction we're going towards. I think there's a lot of really great work on solving problems on Earth, but I think some fraction of civilization focusing on what does this all mean. Essentially, we've lived on Earth for many generations and millennia of phases of life, and each successive generation has really focused on improving and moving things forward. But I think life has to be more than just about like 8 billion people living on Earth, and then 9 billion, and then 10 billion. I think it's got to also be, what does it all mean, and what does it mean to be a human being? So for me, I think actually the reason that, the work everyone here in the analog community is doing is so important is because I actually think the urgency for going to other planets is not that an asteroid is going to destroy Earth and we need to go to Mars as a backup. I think for sure that can happen statistically. It's going to be a really long time, and the world is going to look so different by the time that's a real risk. So I actually think it's more about kind of just what it means to be a human being, period. Like, again, if we had 1 million people living on Mars during this conference, I just think the emotions you can feel, there's going to be a Amelie long-distance love relationship between Earth and Mars. There's going to be Martian news and sports and culture, and they're going to start deviating in really weird ways, I would assume, that are really interesting to study. I know the panel yesterday, they were talking about more intentionality on other planets, and it's kind of a chance to bring the best of what humanity is capable of. So I'm certainly a big optimist in it. But I think the why now really has more to do with the fact of also what everyone's been talking about, that the hard part about human exploration is the squishy bodies. It's food, water, shelter, and boredom. And once you take those 4 things out, space travel is certainly hard, but it's a lot easier. And so I actually worry more about the rate of progress of AI and robotics technology over the next many decades, because whether it's 50 years, 100 years, or 200 years, in the grand scheme of life, we're actually living in a very narrow slice of window where human beings are the best thing to go out and kind of explore the cosmos. I think at some point in the future, AI and robotics technology will be so good that the incentive to send people will be lower, because intelligent robotics and humanoid type robots will certainly be far, far better and not too long of a time scale. So I think this is the golden window of opportunity for people to really be the ones to go do it, and I would certainly like to see that happen.
And on that note, humanity being the thing that has actually led us back to our Earth. It's those accidents, the moments of capturing the Earthrise, or Carl Sagan, fighting to get that 4-pixel image. It's the person that captures those moments that enable awe and wonder. So this is a project here on the right that is inspired by aquatic life, marine organisms, and seeing how can we use space to advocate for our oceans. So this launched from the Kennedy Space Center. It's about 16 feet tall. It has iridescent material and glows in the dark. So taking a lot of properties of marine ecology and then translating that into the sculpture. The inner nucleus is inspired by AI, so it has a summation of about 1,000 different species included. So this was a piece that took off in 2021 with Space Perspectives.
And then I'll be real quick for time. So this is Terran 1. It's our first rocket that we're about to launch to orbit. It's a rendering, but we have basically the whole thing's built at this point. So we're doing second stage acceptance testing. It's in a space center. The whole first stage is almost entirely built, and so we just need to ship it and then do the launch. So it's a few months from now at Cape Canaveral. Yes, super excited. And yeah, that's really big. We do have a super secret art project that's going to go on it. I can't announce any details yet, but yeah, it's going to be very cool. So, and then this is a photo of the Space Perspectives Living Light project that Richelle made in space. So I remember when we got this photo back last year, I was super pumped, one, because it was in space, and that was like very cool. And it was a huge art project, like Richelle mentioned, 16 feet wide. It was Space Perspectives' first balloon launch to a little over 100,000 feet. So it was amazing that they trusted essentially the whole marketing of their kickoff as a company, and it was really their first press to have this giant art project on it. And then of course it was inspiration for me to see what a rocket in orbit will hopefully look like.
1 minute. Awesome.
Yep.
You can go to the next slide.
Okay.
So this, the theme of our talk being how do we visualize and envision alternative futures? So bringing it back. What Tim and I have discovered in our 9 years together, 10 years almost, is that we have the power to shape things. And what we realize is in this community how important it is to push that forward, envision these alternative futures. Because Tim and I continually think about the vision of what we want, what we spend our daily activities doing is catching up to that vision. And so we've been talking a lot about futures literacy and how we need more people to just visualize what this future could look like. These are just a couple examples of different iterations. I think they're quite beautiful, bringing in a lot of the agriculture and a lot of these organic forms. But then we have those sci-fi narratives with the kind of more sterile white environments. Both have their role, but what I am hoping in the art community and with this community is starting to paint those pictures of different futures so we can all catch up to that vision. And with that, enabling others to realize that they have the power to make that happen. Just one quick thing to mention is I was talking to an elderly woman, and she was telling me that in her life she always thought there'd be flying cars. And she was like, but what I realized is if I didn't actively participate in making that happen, it wouldn't exist. And so I think that's the thing, that's the biggest takeaway for us, is every item, every material around us was made by somebody. And if we want to live in a greener future, that we actually can't just wait for time to pass and end up there, that we have to be the makers in it. So that's what we're all about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And of course, we kind of realized the irony of, at a conference of analog astronauts showing them renderings of things on the moon and things on Mars, because so many people are thinking about things on the moon and things on Mars here, which is so amazing. But I think, I think as Richelle said, the big thing to me, and maybe the takeaway, is just think about scale. I know it was at the panel yesterday, someone said, wow, like, what if we had an analog of 20 people or 30 people? What if you had an analog of 1,000 people or 10,000 people? I do wonder what that could potentially look like. I know that's a crazy goal and financially very challenging, and there's all sorts of challenges, but I certainly think if we're gonna have 1 million people living somewhere else, if that's what we're agreeing is long-term the true target, we should probably find a way to have a path towards 10,000 people somewhere on Earth at some point getting together and learning more at scale. So more just inspiration, dream big, you gotta think big. If we want this to happen, certainly I think what we're doing is gonna play a big part, hopefully, and yeah, excited to answer any questions that you all have.
Well, I was just thinking of what you're saying at the end with the 10,000, and I haven't been there yet, but what came to mind was Burning Man.
That's what I said.
Yeah. And so is that kind of the, a start in that direction?
Yeah.
Yes.
So we haven't been to Burning Man, even though we're big concert heads. But I think that is actually a really good example of seeing not only how do people live off that land. I know there's a lot of trading and resources that are spread throughout the community during Burning Man, but then also how does that uplift the thinking. I think that a lot of people are driven to go to those types of environments because it upgrades how you think about creating, how you think about sharing with each other, and getting that perspective shift is so important. And yeah.
Yeah, I think, like Richelle said, we haven't been over 300 music shows, but never Burning Man. I don't know why, but I would guess the hard part about it, though, is actually the closed loop system and figuring out energy generation at scale. I would imagine some of the activities that are ongoing at Burning Man are not what you would do in a life or death survival situation. I think it's more in the thriving situation. So from that perspective, I think we've got a ways to go. I'm more interested in, I know the UAE did have a project they were doing at some point where they were going to build a Martian city. I think they were going to commit $4 billion to doing it. I don't actually know. Do what?
That's something.
China? Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I believe it. But yeah, I think it's more the kind of closed loop, enclosed system at scale, and especially hearing the talks yesterday, that sounds like one of the most important challenges. For me, I'm thinking about industrial base, like how would you actually build things once you're there, because all the original animations I saw of Starship and ITS land on Mars, and it was very inspiring, faded to black right when the astronauts walked out. So I certainly think that was like a big wake-up call, that there need to be all sorts of other things that are being built. My encouragement is, of course it's an economic problem, fundamentally, and so finding ways to have dual use technology, not military civil dual use, but dual use space, terrestrial business is a really huge enabler. So I think solving things like food and water purity, resource utilization, automation, all of that stuff, if you can build a super lucrative Earth-based business, then it will allow us as a kind of society to get more resources to then be able to fund this sort of thing. At least that's my approach.
That's time for a quick one. Real quick, I just want to, since Richelle hasn't mentioned it, she does have this amazing art exhibit out there, Super Glide. So don't forget to mention that at the end. Oh, yeah. You want to talk about it now real quick?
Sure, Super Glider. So it's an art tech science space that I founded. Since Relativity Gallery is going to be a little bit later, Super Glider is a way to collide art and science. And we actually have our amazing curators, Laura and Paige, and an artist, Yasmin, who's a participant in the show. They've put together the entire curation. It's scattered throughout the biosphere too, both inside and outside. And you will be hosting the exhibit till 9 p.m. tonight, is that right? So there's going to be some activations in the evening that really come to life, so definitely explore.
All right, I have a question. So you said you could have 1,000 people in an analog study. Could you 3D print Biosphere 3 for us when you do this?
I'll answer quickly. Yeah, I get asked all the time, can you 3D print this or that? So 3D printing does super well with high dollar per pound products. So if a car weighed 4,000 pounds and a rocket weighed 4,000 pounds, the 3D printer is just X pounds per hour. So essentially a car and a rocket take the same amount of time to print, but clearly you can sell a rocket for way more. So the best arbitrage is with lightweight things that cost a lot. That happens to be aerospace, so that's why starting with rockets, other than just very deep passion, and I love rockets, it is a good economic opportunity. You know, there are people doing buildings with 3D printing. There's a company called Icon, which is really cool, another called Mighty Buildings, and then actually a professor at USC, I think Kishnevitz, he's doing some Mars and lunar-based regolith printing. So people are doing more large-scale structures, and certainly some of those big skyscraper-sized buildings, I think 3D printing there would be really awesome.
I won't answer that question.
Richelle's like, can I paint on Biosphere 3? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a break, so like, if you want to like excuse yourself, that's fine. But they're great to listen to, so I'm fine to stop for a little longer.
Thank you so much for sitting down for a second. I'm just really curious. You mentioned at the end, sort of leading into a greener future, and I'm curious what kinds of specific things that you're doing. Like, is it around the 3D printing leading to less waste? Are you able to use different types of fuel, or use it more efficiently? What are specifically the cool green stuff that's coming out of the technology you're building?
That's a good question.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a term in aerospace called buy-to-fly ratio. So it's essentially what percent of the material makes its way into the finished part. Usually kind of the classic process is you start with a giant big block of metal, whether it's aluminum, titanium, Inconel, and then you essentially mill it all away. So that's like a sculpting process, so to speak, or subtractive manufacturing. It means you have to use all of the energy to melt this huge hunk of metal. And since aerospace parts are usually very lightweight, you carve it down to some super small kind of finished, bone structure looking mass. With 3D printing, it's the opposite. You actually locally are melting the metal and then build it up. So it definitely uses a lot less energy. I've seen some reports, depending on the part, it uses 70% less energy. And that's not even including the energy that it takes to actually melt the metal itself. So I think it's kind of still very early days for this tech. And that's what's exciting to me. It's more about compounding rates of progress. Relativity has printers now that are 10 times faster than the ones we had a year ago, and we're actually printing rocket parts with them now. So we can build a whole rocket in like 60 days. And the next vehicle we're doing, which is 220 feet tall, 20,000 kilograms, we'll also do that one in about 60 days. So really, really fast. And thoughts on the environment?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that covers it.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't need a microphone, but can you talk about the art that you created, High Seas, and some of the ways that you use the materials of your environment or what you have available to you?
Awesome.
Yeah, repeat the question.
Yeah, so she was just asking me about the art that was made at High Seas during a space analog. I've traveled to quite a few different places, whether I'm in a tiny room on a sailboat making art and turning it into an immersive art exhibition, or being on Mars. And what I've found to be very exciting is thinking totally different about how art is made. So, for example, one of the projects that I worked on at High Seas was actually taking a painting I had made on Earth and digitizing it and making that into binary code and sequencing that code into DNA. So then this DNA capsule is actually hidden deep into the depths of a lava tube at High Seas. I don't know when it will be retrieved. But essentially, it's kind of evolving this idea, inspired by the Golden Record Project. How do we archive our visual culture and that story? And with the Golden Record, if you don't have a record player, it might be more difficult to find those sounds. But as long as there's life, we're always going to be able to retrieve data from DNA. So this project is also currently at the International Space Station, and then it will later fly to the moon this year. And so it's just thinking about like DNA. I never thought that could be an art material. And I think that these analogs really push you into that state of being. And as like Benjamin mentioned, It's almost like a hypnosis when you're on an analog and you start to really believe that you're there. I felt like listening to music, the songs brought up Earth memories, but then I could also affiliate those songs to new memories on Mars, and just seeing how those different types of immersive experiences completely change the way that you think about creating. So that's where I find that potential. As you mentioned, Mary Liz, it's that evolution of our musical instruments. The same thing is happening with visual art. We get to make things totally differently.
Yeah. And I think one thing, maybe it's so obvious to you, but it's interesting to me watching kind of artists and analog environments and the way you approach art, Richelle, is it's really about redefining what art's all about. I mean, it's not lost on us. I think for many centuries, art was really just 2D works or sculpture put on a white wall somewhere. And that was really the definition of what art's all about. And I think so many of the artists here are really redefining what that looks like and actually intersecting more with actual research and science and exploration. And I think that's really cool, just to redefine what that boundary looks like, because yeah, I think again it's about pushing the human consciousness forward. I also think that's, going back to why go to space, like certainly scientific endeavor is really big, but at the end of the day, I don't want to be morbid, but sort of, we all live and we all kind of know how the story ends at some point in our life. And so when you really look at this time as just years to play with and focus on what to do, I actually sort of think going to space could almost be like humanity's greatest art project in a way. And it's not, like, I think so many people use the word art, like, oh, that's cute. But actually, if you think of what it means to be a human and express and have creativity, why can't going to space itself not only be the greatest scientific adventure, but the greatest artistic adventure too?